I've been retired for 3 years, and in all that time, the hardest thing I ever had to do wasn't selling my company, wasn't moving out of the house where my kids grew up, and it wasn't even burying my wife. The hardest thing I ever did was sit at my own dinner table, eat in silence, and pretend I didn't hear what my son-in-law said about me in the next room. Let me back up. My name is Gerald. I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years building a mid-size logistics and freight brokerage out of Mississauga, Ontario. Nothing flashy. We moved goods across the border, Toronto to Detroit, Hamilton to Buffalo, and at our peak we had 42 employees and 3 warehouses. I didn't inherit money. My father was a machinist in Oshawa. My mother worked the checkout at a grocery store on Dundas until her knees gave out. Everything I built from scratch. That's not me bragging. That's just context, because the story doesn't make sense without it. My wife, Carol, passed away 6 years ago. Breast cancer. We had 34 years together, and I still don't know how to talk about losing her without feeling like something in my chest goes sideways. She was the kind of woman who remembered everyone's birthday, who kept a little notebook by the phone to write down things people mentioned in passing. Their dog's name, their mother's surgery, their kid's hockey tournament, and she'd follow up. Every single time. People loved Carol the way you love someone who makes you feel seen. We had 2 children. Our son Patrick lives in Vancouver with his family. We're close in the way that geography allows. Phone calls on Sundays, holidays when schedules line up, visits every year or 2. Patrick and I understand each other. We always have. Our daughter, Renee, is 41. She lives in Burlington, about 40 minutes from where I'm from. She's smart, organized, driven. She got that from Carol. After university, she went into marketing, climbed fast, and by her mid-30s, she was managing campaigns for a regional healthcare company. I was proud of her. I still am, even now, even after everything. Pride doesn't just switch off. Renee married a man named Bradley about 8 years ago. Bradley works in commercial real estate. He's the kind of man who talks a lot about what things are worth, properties, investments, deals, but who never quite gets around to talking about what things mean. I tried to like him. I did like him, for a while. The way you like someone, because they're connected to someone you love. When Carol got sick, the 2 of them were there. I'll give them that. When she passed, Renee stayed with me for 2 weeks, and that meant more than I can say. Bradley drove me to the notary. He helped me sort through some of the paperwork. In those early months, he seemed decent. The trouble started slowly. That's always how it starts. About 4 years ago, Bradley's commercial real estate work started expanding. He was talking about opening his own small brokerage, not large scale, but something he could build independently. He had a client base, some relationships with developers in the Hamilton-Halton area, and what he needed, he said, was startup capital and a proper office space. I had recently sold my business. After taxes and everything settled, I was comfortable. Not wealthy in the way people imagine when they hear sold a company, but comfortable. I had the family home in Mississauga, a 4-bedroom detached, fully paid off, worth close to $2 million at that point, and a reasonable portfolio. Carol and I had lived carefully. We didn't take lavish vacations or buy boats. We saved, reinvested, and tried not to spend like the money would last forever. Bradley came to me with a proposal. He typed it out, printed it, put it in a folder. I remember thinking that was either impressive or suspicious, and I wasn't sure which. He wanted to use the house as collateral to secure a business line of credit, and he wanted me to co-invest $120,000 in the new brokerage. He showed me projections. He used phrases like conservative estimate and realistic upside. I said I'd think about it. I talked to my accountant, a man named Ron, who I've trusted since 1998. Ron told me not to put the house up as collateral under any circumstances. The investment itself, he said, was my call, but the house was my primary asset and my security. Gerald, he said, if this goes sideways, you have nowhere to fall back to. I took that seriously. I went back to Bradley and said I wouldn't put the house up, but I was willing to invest $50,000, not $120, and I'd want a proper shareholder agreement drawn up by a lawyer. Bradley smiled the way people smile when they're hiding disappointment. He said that was fine. He said he appreciated it. Looking back, I think that's when something shifted. He got what he asked for. Partly, but not all of it. And I think some people, when they don't get exactly what they want, start keeping a quiet tally. I moved into Renee and Bradley's home 14 months ago. That wasn't the original plan. The original plan was that I'd stay in Mississauga indefinitely. But the house had become too large, too quiet, and too full of Carol, in a way that felt less like comfort and more like a wound that wouldn't close. Patrick had been suggesting for a year that I should think about downsizing. Renee asked, genuinely, warmly, if I'd like to come stay with them for a while, to see how it felt. Their house in Burlington was a beautiful 4-bedroom in a good neighborhood. Their kids, my grandchildren, 8-year-old Owen and 11-year-old Lily, were there. I thought it would be good for me. I thought it would be good for everyone. The first few months were fine, better than fine. I'd cook Sunday dinners, the big ones Carol used to make, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans with almonds. Owen would sit on the kitchen counter and ask me questions about literally everything. What's that gadget? Why do you salt the water? How come you don't use a timer? I loved those Sunday afternoons. They were the first time since Carol passed that I felt like myself again. I helped with things around the house. I'm handy. I always have been. I recaulked the upstairs bathroom, painted the back fence, fixed the garage door sensor that had been sticking. I drove Owen to hockey twice a week when Bradley was traveling and Renee was in back-to-back meetings. I picked up Lily from her violin lesson on Thursday afternoons, and we'd stop at the Tim Hortons on Appleby line, and she'd get a hot chocolate, and I'd get a medium dark roast, and we'd sit for 20 minutes before heading home. Those were good days. But somewhere around month 4, I started to notice a change in Bradley. It was small at first. He'd come home and go straight upstairs without acknowledging me in the living room. He started having dinner in his office 2 or 3 nights a week, claiming work calls. When he was at the table, he'd answer questions in single words and spend most of the meal looking at his phone. I told myself he was stressed. Real estate had been volatile. Interest rates in Ontario had been brutal for commercial properties. I gave him the benefit of the doubt. Then came the comments. Small ones, indirect. He started asking Renee, in front of me, which I think was deliberate, whether she'd looked at the budget for the month, whether groceries had gone up, whether they'd thought about their guest situation. That word, guest. I'd been living there for half a year. I'd given them money every month. I insisted on it, $500, which I knew didn't cover my actual costs but which felt right as a gesture of contribution. I paid for my own prescriptions, my own clothing, my own haircuts. I wasn't taking anything from them. Renee would redirect those conversations quickly. I could tell she was embarrassed. She'd say something about how they had it handled or that they'd talk later. Bradley would nod and go back to his phone. I didn't say anything. That's how I was raised. You notice, you process, and you wait to see if a pattern develops before you make it a confrontation. Carol always said I had more patience than was healthy. She wasn't wrong. The pattern developed. One evening in February, it was a Thursday, I know because I'd just gotten back from picking up Lily. I came into the kitchen to make tea. Bradley was on the phone in the adjoining family room. He had his back to me and I don't think he heard me come in. I wasn't eavesdropping. I was just there. He was talking to someone I didn't know. A friend, maybe, based on the tone, and I heard him say clearly, no ambiguity, the problem is he doesn't contribute. He's here all day. He eats, he watches TV, and Renee just thinks it's fine because he's her dad. But I'm the one running this household. I stood at the kettle. I didn't move. I don't want to be his caretaker, Bradley continued. I'm not a charity. I waited for him to finish the call. I poured my tea. I went upstairs, and I sat in my room, and I looked out the window at the backyard, where Owen's hockey net was sitting in the snow, and I thought about Carol, and about the 31 years I spent making sure my family never had to worry about anything, and I felt something settle in me the way ice settles on a lake in November. Quiet. Final. I didn't say a word to Renee that night. I didn't say anything to Bradley. I went to sleep, and in the morning, I called Ron. Ron asked me 2 questions. First, was the house in my name? Yes. The Mississauga house was still in my name. I'd never transferred it. When Renee and I had discussed the arrangement, we'd talked loosely about potentially adding her to the title one day, but we had never done it. There was no legal document, no transfer, nothing filed. It was my house. Second question, Was there anything in writing about the living arrangement? No. There was no agreement, no contract, no letter of intent. It had been handled the way families handle things. On trust, on love, on assumption. Ron said, "Okay, Gerald, so you have options." I thought about those options carefully over the next several weeks. I didn't rush. I want to be clear about that, because I know how this story sounds from the outside, and I know people will assume I acted out of anger. I didn't. By the time February turned into March, I had moved past anger. What I felt was clarity, a very quiet, very calm kind of clarity that I think only comes after you've been genuinely hurt and genuinely decided what to do about it. I listed the Mississauga house in late March. The market in that area had been strong. 4-bedroom detached, hardwood floors, updated kitchen, finished basement, double garage, corner lot. The listing went up on a Wednesday. By Friday, we had 11 offers. By Saturday night, it was sold, conditional on financing, for $1,940,000. When the conditions were lifted 2 weeks later, it was firm. I did not tell Renee or Bradley until the sale was firm. Renee called me on a Tuesday evening. She'd seen the listing. A neighbor from Mississauga had texted her a screenshot. She was confused, not angry yet, just confused. "Dad, is this real? Did you list the house?" "I did," I said. "But why? When did you decide this?" "I've been thinking about it for a while," I said. "That was true. Are you okay? Is something wrong? Why didn't you tell me?" "I'm fine," I said. "I've been thinking about what Ron always told me. Keep the asset, stay flexible. I've decided to do something different with the money." "What do you mean, something different? Where are you going to live?" "I've put a deposit on a condo in Oakville," I said. "It's a 2-bedroom. It has a nice view of the lake. I think Carol would have liked it." There was a pause, long enough that I heard Renee take a breath. "You're moving out," she said. It wasn't quite a question. "Yes," I said. Then she started to cry. Not the kind of crying that's manipulation. I know the difference. This was the real kind, the kind that catches people off guard. And I felt it. Of course I felt it. She's my daughter. But I also knew that what was happening between us in that moment wasn't the actual problem. The actual problem was the man who had told his friend that I was not contributing, that I was a burden, that I was not worth the space I occupied in a house that I had paid for, and a life I had built. "Renee," I said, "I love you, and I love Owen and Lily more than I can tell you. This isn't about you. Then what is it about?" Her voice was small. I thought for a moment about whether to tell her, about the Thursday in February, the kettle, the phone call. I decided not to, not then. Some things you say when the time is right, and some things you carry for a while. "I just need my own space," I said. "I'm 67. I should have my own space." She said she understood, even though I don't think she fully did. We talked for another 20 minutes about the practical details. When I'd be moving, whether I needed help, what would happen to some of Carol's furniture I'd brought over. By the end of the call, she sounded steadier. Before we hung up, she said, "I'm going to miss you being here." And I believed her. Bradley called me 2 days later. His tone was different from Renee's. Tighter. He'd done the math by then, I assume. He knew what that house was worth, what the sale meant, what it meant that the money was mine and only mine, and that I'd had no legal obligation to discuss any of it with either of them. "Gerald," he said, "I want to understand what's happening here." "What do you mean?" I asked, though I knew exactly what he meant. "You've been living here for over a year. We made a home for you here. And now you're just selling the house? Without telling us? Without talking to us first?" "It was my house to sell, Bradley." A pause. "I'm aware of that." "Good," I said. "Then there's nothing to misunderstand. I just think," he started, and his voice had that careful, controlled quality that people use when they're trying not to say what they actually want to say, "that after everything, after we opened our home to you, a conversation might have been appropriate." I let that sit for a moment. The phrase, "opened our home," I let that sit. "Bradley," I said, "I want to ask you something, and I'd like you to be honest with me." He said, "Okay. Do you consider me a contributor to this household, or a burden?" The silence that followed was the longest one I've ever sat through on a telephone. It must have been 15 seconds, maybe 20. In 15 or 20 seconds, you can feel the shape of a truth that someone doesn't want to hand you. "Of course you're not a burden," he said finally. "Okay," I said. "I'm glad to hear it. I didn't bring up the phone call. I didn't tell him I'd heard it. I didn't need to. We both knew what the silence had meant. Some conversations say more when they stay unspoken. I hope you'll still be part of the kids' lives, he said. His voice had softened. I don't know whether it was genuine or tactical. I've decided not to spend too much time trying to figure out which. Owen and Lily will always have me, I said. That has nothing to do with where I sleep. The condo in Oakville closes in 6 weeks. It's on the 11th floor. The balcony faces the lake. Lake Ontario on a clear day in October looks like hammered silver. I've already ordered a small table and 2 chairs for out there. One for me and one for when the grandkids visit. I've been thinking a lot in these past months about what it means to be useful, about how it gets conflated with being productive in a visible, measurable way. Bradley measures usefulness in transactions. Deals closed, dollars moved, lines of credit secured. By that measure, I wasn't contributing. I wasn't generating revenue from his family room. I wasn't billing hours while I reseeded the back lawn, or stayed up until 11 when Owen had a fever and Renee had an early presentation. But that's a narrow way to measure a life. It's a narrow way to measure anything. I put the proceeds from the sale into a GIC ladder and a modest equity fund through my investment advisor. Conservative the way Ron has always kept me. I also set up education savings accounts for Owen and Lily. Registered education savings plans. Maximize the contributions to capture the Canada Education Savings Grant. That's 20% on the first $2,500 every year. I didn't tell Renee or Bradley I'd done this. It's not for them. It's for the kids, to be there when they need it, quietly, the way I've always tried to be there. Patrick called me after he heard about the house sale. He's the kind of person who cuts straight to it. Dad, he said, are you okay? Better than I've been in a while, I said. Did something happen with Bradley? I thought about how to answer. Bradley and I have different ideas about what family means, I said. Patrick made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. That tracks, he said. We talked for a long time after that, about Mom, about the house in Mississauga, and all the years we'd spent in it. Patrick's hockey equipment, always in the entryway. Renee's school projects spread across the kitchen table. Carol's garden in the backyard. About how the right time to let something go isn't when it falls apart, but when you've gotten everything from it you were supposed to get. I'm not angry at Renee. I want to say that clearly, because it matters. She was caught between her husband and her father, and in my experience, that is one of the hardest places to be. She didn't make those comments on the phone. She didn't treat me like an inconvenience. She made Sunday dinners with me, and she laughed at my bad jokes, and she cried, genuinely, when she found out I was leaving. I believe she loves me. I believe she always will. But love doesn't always protect you from the atmosphere of the house you live in. There's something I've come to understand about quiet people, and I've always been quiet, more comfortable listening than talking, more likely to observe than to confront. People sometimes mistake the quiet for acceptance. They think that because you haven't objected, you don't see. They think that because you're patient, you're permanent, that you'll absorb whatever gets directed at you, and keep showing up, keep cooking Sunday dinner, keep picking up the grandkids, keep signing the checks and fixing the gutters, and asking for nothing in return, forever. Because what else are you going to do? I want to say this to anyone who might recognize themselves in this story. Quiet people see everything. We just choose carefully when to act. The movers come in 3 weeks. I've packed most of Carol's things carefully. Her books, her teapot collection. The framed photos from our 30th anniversary trip to Prince Edward Island. I'm bringing the rocking chair from the Mississauga living room that she picked out at an antique shop in Elora. I'll put it on the balcony, I think, and on the mornings when it's not too cold I'll sit there with my coffee and look at the lake and think about 34 years. With a woman who wrote everyone's birthday in a small notebook and never once made anyone feel like they were anything less than exactly enough. That's what love looks like. Not a line on a spreadsheet, not a transaction, not $120,000 and your name on a deed. Just a woman who remembered what mattered, and a man who finally understood that he did too.